to me. So I appreciate it.
Well, that's all right. Well, having a life that's just fine, not saying that everything is all perfect, but you certainly are doing things that we want to talk about. So welcome, welcome, welcome to for Dr. Ebony Cole today's podcast interview. And so Dr. Cole, kind of give us our listeners kind of a update or a 30-second bio on who you are and kind of where you are right now and kind of what's going on in your world.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, like you mentioned, I'm Dr. Ebony Cole. Very proud to be able to say that. It's been a little over a year now since I earned my doctorate. Born and raised in Akron, Ohio. And, like anybody else, I've seen a lot of challenges in life, but, have been able to overcome those challenges and then, done a lot of things in terms of work related. But at this point in time, I am fortunate enough to be able to um, be a project director for a TRIO program. And I'd like to say it's one of the most rewarding jobs I've ever had, and also one of the funnest. So when you can, get something back that really is congruent with your spirit and then have some fun in the process, it's not a whole lot more you can ask in terms of something that we call work. So yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at right now. I'm an author as well. In addition to obviously having published my dissertation, I published 2 years ago, just about 2 years ago, a memoir about my life, something that I felt like was absolutely necessary for me to do. It wasn't optional in my life; it was
Yeah.
necessary. One, because you know how our community feels about therapy and the stigma that comes behind that. This was a very therapeutic exercise for myself, and I allowed myself to forgive others and myself for things that were done and said and experienced in this life. And we got to start that healing process at some point. And I don't know if you want to say unfortunately or fortunately, but when we become a certain age, are responsible for our own healing. You can't look to everyone else
Yeah.
to patch it up and make it better. You're responsible for your own healing. So that's what my memoir, Wishing for Pancakes, a memoir, volume one, is all about. Was literally just me getting all of that stuff off of my chest and starting that healing process for myself and for my daughter and anyone else in my, for my legacy.
Yes, yes. Well, speaking of legacy, you mentioned your dissertation, and
Mm,
that was certainly a journey. And so your study uses a critical race feminism framework. For
correct.
those that's unfamiliar, can you explain what that is and why it's essential for centering the voices of Black females, graduate students?
I sure can. So, most people who write, well, let's just first of all, let me say the title of the dissertation so that people kind of get an understanding of what it was about. And then I'll jump into critical race feminism and why I chose that as my theoretical framework, which is something that really undergirds the entire study.
Okay.
So the dissertation is entitled I'm sorry, ooh, Lord, I was about to say something. I was about to talk about my ebook, which I didn't even tell you about. Um, no,
Talk
the
about that too.
dissertation. I forgot about the ebook. I don't know where that came from, but anyway, the dissertation is entitled "Silenced and Marginalized: A Qualitative Study of Gendered Racial Microaggressions Among Black Female Graduate Students." And so, what I did was I looked at um, what Black females at the graduate school level were experiencing in terms of racism, microaggressions, stereotypes, um, what do I want to call it, controlling images,
Mhm.
things of that nature, and how that impacted their success or lack thereof, for that matter, in that space in academia. So that's what the um, dissertation was all about. And I chose critical race feminism to undergird the study because, and what I was going to start off by saying is most people who look at race and racism in their dissertations, they typically, I won't say all of them, but a typical theoretical framework is critical race theory, right? And so that's been a hot topic and a hot, button issue here as of late because of how it has been conflated with so many other things because people refuse to really do the research to figure out what it's all about. But anyway, so critical race feminism actually takes parts of critical race theory. It takes parts of Black feminist thought, and it takes parts of intersectionality. So it's really an amalgamation, if you will, of several different theories that come together to really kind of tell that story about Black females. So let me give you a quick example of why that's important for us in particular as Black women, right? So Black men, we all know you all have challenges in this world. We know it, right? It's on TV every day. It's, you experience it every day.
True.
However, we live in a patriarchal society. So you all still benefit from being male in a patriarchal society. So you have your strike against you, unfortunately, is being Black. So your race is the strike, but you still benefit from being male. White females, yes, we all as females have challenges. We face gendered bias and all sorts of things. However, white women, still benefit from being white in a society where being white is, everything, where white supremacy is the foundational ideology, right? So they still benefit from being white. Black females, we sit at the intersection of both racism and sexism, right? So where are we benefiting? Where is there a benefit to being a Black female? So ultimately, we end up at we're the low man on the totem pole in the racial hierarchy, right? And so that's why it's so important to look at not just the critical race theory aspect of it, but to bring in that Black feminist thought and to bring in that intersectionality, which allows us to kind of view all of these things at the same time. Because being Black, yes, I face all sorts of challenges. Being female, I face all sorts of challenges, but sitting at that nexus of both Black and female is a completely different experience. And if you don't sit at that nexus, you don't understand what that looks like. And so that's why I bring these theories all together to then be able to kind of talk about what that experience really looks like, to share that with everyone, to kind of give them a glimpse into what our world looks like. And so that we can then begin that healing process, not just with ourselves, but with others who interact with us.
When you look at the just kind of African-American men and Black women in the marketplace and business, it is a wonder that you all are still overrepresented in comparison to Black men in those spaces, despite being the low person on the totem pole. How do you account for that, and talk a little bit about what that dynamic looks like as well?
So I think a lot of that has to do with, and I'm glad you brought that up because we don't talk about this enough, in my opinion, and we don't have enough time today, Will, to get into the weeds about why this really is the case. However, it really kind of goes back to the divide and conquer that I think, unfortunately, is happening to our community. So, if you take the Black male out of the home, take them out of the workplace,
right,
and you give these privileges to Black females, then it looks lopsided. You emasculate or effeminate or whatever you want to call it, the Black male, and then, you prop up the female. Now, a lot of people will say, well, then that's kind of saying that the things that Black females have or get, they don't deserve. But that's not true either.
Not at all.
Not right. But I'm just saying, I'm always about, the next thing or what someone's going to try to come
Hmm.
at me with when I say whatever it is that I say. And that's not the case at all. We're just trying to navigate the game the way that they set it up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you also mentioned themes like isolated and silenced, and common stereotypes like the angry Black woman.
Mhm.
How do these narratives still play out today, even supposedly in a progressive academic setting?
So, yeah, these stereotypes definitely still play. I mean, I experience them all the time. I am a very driven Black female. I'm a very outspoken Black female. And oftentimes, when you have that combination of things, that a lot of people are fearful of that because they don't expect you. In fact, they don't respect you enough to have an opinion, one. But then, two, when you have this forceful opinion and you can back it up with
Hmm.
facts, then I think people become intimidated. And so they start to project whatever they're feeling onto you. So if I'm speaking and I'm, giving my opinion and I'm speaking just like I'm speaking now, I can be accused of being, oh, she's so aggressive. Whereas if I was white male, it'd be like, man, he sure is, what's a good word? Assertive.
Confident, shrewd, assertive,
Yeah, you know,
visionary,
knows his stuff. He's a
knows
maverick.
his stuff. Absolutely. Yep.
You know? But we've never been accused of being a maverick. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Kamala Harris was literally the most qualified person to ever run for the
Absolutely.
presidency of these United States.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the way that people just casually toss out, "Oh, she's so dumb." That's the wildest thing in the world to me.
Eh,
Or you'll hear them say things like, "Well, she slept her way to the top."
Like, boy,
What?
that is so, yeah. And that, and if you just taking that example, if you just took and just put on paper the experience points that, and on each side of the paper, you just did a little T-chart and put them on each side
Yeah.
of the paper, everybody would pick candidate. Let's call her candidate A. They would
Yeah.
pick candidate A every
Every
single
time.
time, every
Every
single
time.
time.
Every
But
time.
as you put the emotions on top of it, and the stereotypes and the racism, all those
Mhm.
things cloud good judgment. All
Yeah.
those things cloud good judgment. Now, one of the things that you also talked about is identity shifting, right? So, can
Oh,
you
yeah.
speak to the emotional toll of constantly feeling the need to change or to shrink who you are in your academic spaces?
It's exhausting. It's exhausting because you feel like you can't show up as your true self.
Okay.
And I've experienced this myself in corporate America. Um, Definitely. You show up in your braids. I've never worn my afro in court. No, I take that back. I have, but not when I reached a certain level.
Yeah.
Not when I became an executive. I never wore my afro. Now I would have when I knew I was on my way out the door because at that point it didn't even matter and I didn't care anymore. But I think that showing up to a place and having to change how you speak, having to constantly think about what it is that you're going to say and how you're going to say it for fear that someone will stereotype you, right? So,
Yeah.
because I mean, I'm Black. I'm going to, speak slang. Yes, I am a doctor. I have a doctorate, the highest level of education that you can reach in this country. But I'm gonna say ain't. Okay. And I'm going to say the things that I say, you know what I mean? And so, but you have to be cognizant of that stuff because
Yeah.
then, you have these people who are putting these stereotypes on you immediately because you show up in the room. And then me just aesthetically, I'm tall, I'm 5'8". That's tall for a Black woman, or for a woman, period. Excuse me. That's tall for a woman. Plus, I always got on heels, so I'm always nearly 6 feet tall. I definitely have a Black woman shape. You know what I'm saying? And so I walk in, and here I am, this Black woman, with, it looking like I look, and then I open my mouth and I'm loud because God blessed me with a voice. I can't help that if I open my mouth, it comes out loud. But then I have to worry, and I'm sitting there like, okay, let me just make sure I, kind of keep it down, because if I speak in my natural, tone, then they're going, oh, I mean, are they fighting? Is someone arguing? What is happening?
Right.
Heaven forbid I laugh, because I'm the biggest laugh in the world, because heaven forbid there's Black joy somewhere, So, it really, and then you go home at the end of the day. I can just remember leaving the office at the end of the day and just feeling like I had to take off a suit or a mask to then fall, back into who Ebony Cole was, and I spend the weekend being myself and then preparing to put that mask back on Monday and to fake smile, I had a wonderful weekend. What'd you want to do? All the game you have to play, and they don't have to do that.
No.
They can show up however they show up and live however they live, and they don't have to think twice about it. Because here's the problem.
Yeah.
If I don't do that, so it's almost like a catch-22, and I literally say this in my dissertation. It's damned if you do and damned if you don't. So if I do behave like I normally behave, just based on their controlling images and their stereotypes, they're going to put me in a box, right? And that's going to stop me from climbing, right? So if I do that, then I'm subject to all of that. But if I don't do it, I'm also subject to being silenced and losing my voice. So what am I going to do? How do I win in that situation? Right? So then I just cover up and don't be who I am and lose my voice, or I do it and then I'm subject to all the stereotypes. And then, you're still gonna, hold me down regardless.
I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So what have you decided to do?
I'm gonna just be me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm just gonna be me. And and here's the thing, Will. And I think this comes with age and experience, because, like everybody else, as a young person, you care so much about how the world sees you. You care so much about what people think about you, because you're growing and you're just still trying to figure this whole thing out. Get to a point in life where you realize that, everybody's crazy and everybody is still trying to figure it out. And the things that they do or say toward you, a lot of times are just them projecting their own insecurities onto you. You show up and you're this, you, right?
Yeah.
Whatever that is, right? And people see it and they're either like, ooh, I'll rock with her. Or they're like, ooh, let me stay away from her because she's projecting everything that I wish that I could be. Right? So then let me kind of back away from that. So I don't like her. She too much. I've been told, you think too highly of yourself. Literally, somebody said that out of their mouths, that you think too highly of yourself. And so, that's the problem with all of us as a people, I think, is that we just don't know who we are. And we're not comfortable in our own skin. And so we allow what other people think to impact how we behave. And so at this point in my life, I'm like, you know what? I mean, I'm going to be Ebony. Yes. I don't have anything else to prove to anybody else. I don't have anything else to prove. I didn't before, but really in my mind, I don't now. I know who I am. I know what I'm capable of. I know what my gifts are. We all have gifts. I say this all the time, Will, and I'll say it now, is that one thing God is going to do is going to put you here with a gift. Right? He does not put anyone on this earth without giving you a gift and a way to thrive and to support yourself. Your job is to figure out what that is. And that's how you give praise and you give thanks, is by acting and walking in that gift that you gave.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so you got to recognize what that is. And for me, He gave us all multiples, if you ask me, but you just got to figure out what they are. But academics was my gift.
Mm-hmm.
And I thank God for that, because as I was navigating, a drug addicted parent, another absent parent, an abusive grandparent, my grades never faltered, ever. Where do you see that? That's usually the tell for most kids when there's a problem in their home, is
Yes.
slipping, right?
Yes.
My grades never slipped. And so I think that's why I kind of flew under the radar of a lot of adults, like in the school system, or normally those checkpoints where people would be like, ooh, something's wrong in that baby's house. You know what I mean? Now, when I got,
Yes.
obviously everybody's like, okay, something's up. She's 14 and pregnant, that's a problem. However, even through all of that, my grades never ever faltered. And so I just thank God that that was a gift that he gave me, because I was able to kind of ride that and to allow that gift to take me from the path that I would have been on, which was a continuation of generational poverty, drug addiction, incarceration, teen pregnancy, things, but God said no. He didn't say I wasn't going to, give you some some issues or some obstacles to overcome, but here's your gift. So Eb, you got to figure out how to take this that I gave you and to make your life better as a result of that. And I was able to do that. And I just thank God for that.
That's emotional. So it looks, during that situation, you were building the muscle of emotional resilience to be able to focus in on your grades, no matter what was going on in your surroundings.
It was an escape, really, Will.
Okay. Yeah.
In addition to, just enjoying school and enjoying that piece. And I'm very competitive too. So I always felt like nobody should be doing better than me.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you play sports in high school?
I ran track. Yes, I did.
Okay. What event?
Multiples. I ran the 100. I anchored the 4x1. I ran the 400, and I anchored the 4x4. And then I occasionally did the long jump. Now, we didn't have triple jump when I was in high school for whatever reason, but in middle school we did, and I was a triple jumping fool. But the long jump, I needed some more. I needed an extra 2 to get me to my max. That one jump was okay, but you give me some speed and some momentum on that, and I'll boom, boom, boom. I was gonna kill it every time.
That is so interesting, because you see how that actually, the physical goes right into your academic and your spiritual, like give you some momentum, and it's gonna get going, and it's gonna be hard to stop.
And you know what? I always use track analogies too. That was a real good one, and I like how you picked up on that. And I always use track analogies in life anyway, because we're all going to face obstacles, and nothing I ever did, Will, was an A to B. There was always a detour. I never got anywhere in a straight line, no matter what it was I was trying to do, whether that was get a degree or the next degree or whatever I set my hand at. It was always a detour. And so there was always that opportunity to stop and be like, you know what, I give up. But then you just have to figure out a different way. There's your GPS right there. You got to turn on your own GPS and figure out, okay, well, this is a dead end, so now I got to figure out the
reroute. That's right.
Rerouting, spinning, routing. And so, so anyway, back to the track analogy. So I always say to people, sometimes this is something that I say, and this is a quote of my own because I think it's so true. Sometimes you have to take a small step backwards before you take a giant leap forward. And then here's the visual for that. Now, I did not do the high jump, but I was around. I was at the field when I was doing the long jump, and so I would see the high jumpers, right? So envision in your mind a high jumper, right? And envision how they look right before they do it. What do they do, Will? They do this.
Back and forth.
They do this, right? They're taking that small step back.
Yep.
Where they explode.
Yes.
And excel and succeed by jumping over that obstacle. Right?
What they say in church, that'll preach, but go ahead. Yes.
Well, you know what I mean? So
yes.
Sometimes when we take that small step back, we really beat ourselves up. And I'm the queen of that, I have to really talk to myself and be like, yo, stop that. I really had a whole conversation with myself just this morning about remembering who you are. And it's not about being cocky, Will. It's about thinking about how far you have come. The climb was steep,
Yes.
and you really have to give yourself some grace when you think about where you came from. And I asked myself a question this morning. I ask myself this from time to time because I have to remind myself. But the question is, and I asked myself again this morning because I felt in my spirit that I needed to, I said, when has God ever let you down? When? Like, think about it. Yeah, you may have been through a lot, but every single time you come out on the other side better. Every time. Right? So all you have to do is just face the storm with faith, knowing that he didn't let you down yet. So this is going to be yet another time that, yes, you face some adversity, but at the same time, you still came out on top. You're fine. You just have to give yourself some grace. And so that's what I did this morning, because, you get in a little funk sometimes. I was in corporate America, and in corporate, the pay structure is way different than when you're working, for the government.
Right.
Program and a grant, and so you get used to living a certain lifestyle, and then you got to figure out what you gonna do. What are you gonna do?
Right.
Are you gonna sell your soul for this money? You gonna come home every day to all the things, driving the car. You got the facade, right? The facade looks, but what does that inside look and feel like?
You're right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I had to make a decision. Will, I walked away. They didn't fire me. I put my 2-week notice in and I said, I can't do this no more. And I've had people say to me, you are a fool. Why would you walk away from X amount of dollars? Why would you walk away from an organization that's been around for, 130 years or however long they had been in existence when I walked away? With a fat 401k and knowing that, you could be set until retirement.
Right.
Why would you do that? They wasn't walking in my shoes, and they didn't have to pull up to that job with a knot in their stomach, physically sick, praying to God that you make it out that day without doing something completely out of your character.
Right. And well, so, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, because if you let me go, I'm gonna keep going. So
when you talk about that, encouraging yourself, I think of a couple people come to mind. Remember this guy? He was a good boxer. He was a pretty good boxer. His name was Muhammad Ali. Greatest of all, and you were wondering, well, like, why did he have to do that? He would always have a hype man, right?
The greatest.
But think about all of the obstacles, like especially during that time period. There's another guy I think about, little scrawny guy, David, and David encouraged himself, and Samuel, what was that? Samuel, 1 Samuel 30:6. He said, and David was greatly distressed, but David encouraged himself in the Lord his God. And so a couple other things. He did it, same thing in Psalm 103. It says, bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me. Bless his holy name. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits. There is a spiritual truth, capital T, regarding encouraging yourself. And the world would rather take it and say, well, she's cocky, she's this, she's that. Like, no, you have to do that because let's just say it took 1,000 words positive to get you where you need to be, but 330 negative words to cut you down. How much, I mean, just in a normal course of a day, you talk about it in your dissertation, these microaggressions.
Yes, sir.
Some of them, you see them coming. Some of them are just like baked in the cake of society.
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Baked in the cake of society.
They are.
So, those things. And so when you look at your book, you dedicated this work to your grandmother, your daughter, your sister, and you did it in a powerful, heartfelt way. How did their presence and these stories shape the passion and persistence that's behind your research?
Um, so we're talking my grandmother and my daughter and my sister, maybe.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
What did I say, sister?
Oh, maybe you didn't, but she's in there, so I
Yes.
definitely want to
Yes.
include
Yes.
her.
Grandmother, daughter, and sister. I apologize.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I no, 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 it's okay. So I have three sisters, but I have one in particular who is 1 year younger than me.
Hmm.
So I like to say, went through the fire together. I call her the P right next to me in our own pod.
Okay.
So yeah, that's my girl. Because again, we are literally like a year and 2 weeks apart.
Okay.
And so I don't remember life without her.
Mm.
Um, my grandmother. So I had two grandmothers, obviously. This one in particular is my mother's mom. And I always say that, and I know this, well, in my mind, it's true. She was put here on earth for me because God knew that I was going to need her. And what's funny is my sister says the same thing about me, which, it's funny when you say it about somebody, but then when somebody says it about you, it's like a weird feeling. It's like, ooh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
But, she was just everything. My mother had some challenges. She still got challenges. And that's life, that stuff, that's something she got to deal with, and then once I learned as a young person, because I wasn't even an adult yet when I had my baby, but once I learned that, who she was and what she did was in no way a reflection of me at all, then I was good. You couldn't hurt my feelings no more by calling my mom a crackhead. You couldn't hurt my feelings. Now, when you're kids, you don't want to stand out in that way as a child. You want to just fit in and be a wallflower, you don't want to stand out. And certainly not in a negative way like that. But once I had the baby and looked at her and realized, I'm a whole mama now and I'm responsible for this individual. I can't worry about what that grown woman does. And what she does is in no way a reflection on Ebony Cole. And I was good after that. However, I'm still young and I know nothing about life, about what's coming, and that's where my grandma kind of jumped in. We called her Gran. Her name was Easter, like the holiday. And anytime she introduced herself, she would say, "My name is Easter, like the holiday." And here comes Easter,
Here comes, right.
And so she was a joy and a blessing to our lives because, that was one time where you felt like somebody loved you unconditionally.
Mm-hmm.
That's where that unconditional love came from. And just her as a woman was an example of what a good woman was. Not a woman without issues, not a woman without flaws, right? But someone who had integrity, someone who cared, someone who loved literally unconditionally. She was that prime example of what I knew womanhood could and should be in a positive way. And so, I took a lot of who I am from her and just the things that she would say to me, as a young person. She told me when I was 18, something that stuck with me for the entirety of my life. She said, "Don't nobody owe you nothing."
Yeah.
Yeah. And that kind of, I didn't know how to take that when I was 18 because I thought that's bullshit. Mm-hmm. Excuse my language, but I really thought that was some BS because I'm like, they had me, I ain't asked to be here, and so it's their job as my parents to take care of me and make sure that I'm good and, all of the things, fill in the blank. But she said, no, don't nobody owe you nothing. And that, especially at that time, I was 18. She's like, you got to get out here. You got to navigate. You got to figure it out. And you got a child looking at you.
Yes.
So you have got to do it. Ask the questions, because you don't know much, but so ask the questions, but you got to walk that walk. You got to be the one. And I'm going to tell you what she used to make me do. Because when I was young, and I had different things that I needed to do, I used to have to make a phone call or whatever. And I was like, "Gran, can you call these people and set this up?" No, absolutely not. You get on the phone, you do the things, you get over whatever that is, and you
come on now.
Plans. You know what I mean? And so she set me up for success because now, not now, obviously now, but I mean, even as I got older and, got into my 20s and, started to get out into the work field and, as soon as you realize, and I know this is kind of sounding like it might be off topic, but I gotta say it. But because as a young person, as soon as you realize, and the sooner you realize is better for you, that your tears don't mean nothing to anybody outside your house, the better off you're gonna be.
It's so funny. It's so funny that you say that because my father, now my parents had me in their 40s, so they were older. So my father was probably in the same age range and generation as Grandma Easter, right?
Yeah, she
And
was born in 36.
So he was born in 2028 or something like that. So in
Okay,
that
so they
same
were
greatest generation type.
Yeah, exactly.
He would tell me this very similar. The world don't owe you a living.
Yeah.
The world does not owe you a living.
Yeah.
And that sticks. Now you had this quote that you had, your acknowledgement that include a quote from Denzel Washington. Do you remember that quote by any chance? If not, I can remind you.
You're so funny. See, my thing is, it is my favorite quote, but I don't like to mess the words up. But give me 2 seconds, don't, because you put me on the spot. So give me a second.
I'm gonna get here. I'm gonna put it right up here.
No, don't put the quote up. I want to say it.
Okay, I won't put it up.
Okay, yeah. Give me a second, because this is my favorite quote. I gotta be able to say it. So give me 2 seconds. True desire. Wait. What is it?
I thought it was the dream. I thought it was started with the dreams.
A dream, not Denzel. Oh, dream. Wait a minute. No, wait. Hold on. No. Which one is it then? Oh no, that ain't the one. That ain't the one.
Okay.
That ain't the one. But that's a good one. But that is not the one. So it's I think it's gosh, what is it? Okay, now I gotta find it because now it's too late. Hold on, I'm going. Hold on. I'm gonna read it. That's a good one though.
I was thinking so the one that we were talking about was dreams without goals or just dreams. And they ultimately fuel disappointment. Goals are the road to achievement and cannot be achieved without discipline and consistency. And when I saw that quote, I just to me it embodies everything that you've done up until now in terms of fighting through those things, because a lot of the things that you've gone through, I just don't know a lot of people would have been able to. I know if you put 10 people in that situation, I don't know if 8 of them come out on this side of the track, so to speak. I'm not sure if they do.
I agree. And, sometimes I think about that and I try not to seem cocky about it. It's not about being cocky. It's just about, I think it's a combination of things for me. But let me say this quote real quick, because now we brought it up and this is my favorite quote, and it is a Denzel quote, and it is a good one. It says, true desire in the heart for anything good is God's proof to you sent beforehand to indicate that it's yours already.
Okay. God, true desire in the heart for anything good is God's proof.
Whatever is in your heart and it's good, that's God's proof sent to you beforehand to indicate that it's yours already. You just got to walk the walk to go get it. Honestly, that true desire in the heart for anything good, that's whatever that good thing is, God put that in there for you. That's a part of your purpose. That's a part of your gift and your purpose. And it's just him telling you, yeah, it's in there and it's good. Guess what? All you got to do is walk in faith, walk to it, go do it. That's your purpose. He wouldn't have even given it to you if it wasn't, attainable.
I'll tell you what, I'm gonna bring it back to, David and true desire. He said, true desire is consistent. True desire leads to pursuit. True desire is willing to wait and work. And if that doesn't embody a lot of things that you've done in your professional life, and I'm sure even your personal life, because your professional life, the way you navigate and move, is the outgrowth of who you are. You tried to do the professional thing just for the money. That didn't work with the rental car.
No,
That didn't work. That you couldn't even, like I said, you couldn't even go in the building sometimes. But
that's true.
it seems like where you are now is for you, but there is for people that are coming after you. And we are so proud that you chose to stick with it, not give up. And
Yeah.
I'm thankful for grandmother Easter telling you
No,
that,
she was the
let you know that
best.
the world does not owe us a living, and
Nope.
which put that desire in you to keep moving, keep going despite the
Yeah.
obstacles. So any closing comments, words of wisdom that you want to leave us with, Doc?
I'll just say, just in thinking about again this journey called life, um, just really learning to fall in love with yourself. It's okay to love yourself. It's
Yes.
not, it's not a bad thing to be like, you know what, I love you. And to actually start to move like you love yourself.
Mm-hmm.
There's one thing to say it, but it's another thing to do it. And so as Black people, we have some challenges in this life, in this country for sure. Um, it's we are what we are, and they are who they are. And so they're going to, act accordingly a lot of the times. And so not letting all the noise make you feel inferior, and just understanding that a lot of that is coming from, a place of inferiority itself, of folks being afraid of you, afraid of your potential, afraid if you succeed. Um, so don't play it small. That's what I'm learning, even as I continue to grow. Um, and just know that it's going to be obstacles no matter what, and so don't be surprised when it's
Right.
obstacle. Just get in line and get your ducks in a row and start figuring out how you're going to figure it out, and to be able to get to the next thing and know that it's coming. But just be ready for the fight. Life is about, it's going to be a fight.
See,
So you can say, oh, I'm an introvert and I don't want to do this and I don't want to do that. Okay, well, it's still coming for you. So you got to figure that
absolutely,
part out. Um,
absolutely,
but yeah,
absolutely.
don't be afraid to fight for what you believe in. Don't be afraid to be assertive, assert who you are, and don't worry about what people are going to say, because guess what? They're going to be talking about you anyway.
Yeah,
Whether you,
exactly,
right?
exactly, exactly.
Always something to look at her, with that wig on, or look at her with, them tight pants on, not knowing that, I mean, this is my size. It's just this is how I look. You know what I mean? So it
Yeah,
doesn't matter. Somebody's always going to have something negative to say about you regardless. You just keep moving, keep progressing, keep outshining, honey, because that's
yes, yes,
the man. You
absolutely.
and
And
don't look.
the people that are coming, your staff, your students,
Mhm.
you have to be all of that for them.
Yeah.
No, you can't be quiet. You can't sit on the gift because you have people. You literally are a general in this struggle because
Yeah.
people need and they pull from you. So
Yeah.
yeah, you have to be over what people may say over the top. But you know what? Over the top is means that you have enough to give to others. So
Yeah, I
because
was
I don't
born
have
that way.
confidence, man,
Right. I can't help it.
yeah,
Like my grandma said, she used to say, oh, he got the can't help it. I got the can't help it. I can't help it. I am who I am. And if
yes,
once you get me started about something that I'm passionate about, I'll turn all the way up and it's just an instant thing. I can't even help it. That happened, last week when we were at the conference.
yeah,
You cannot help it when there's something that is, in your heart. You can't fake being genuine about something. You
absolutely.
just can't fake it.
Well, I
So
certainly thank you, and I'm sure our audience thanks you for spending your time today and kind of sharing who you are and sharing your journey with our listeners and viewers. And my hope is that someone gets something out of this, they get inspired, they get back with you. Let me ask this: so, if somebody wanted to reach out to you, how would
mhm.
they do that? If there's a young lady out there, young man out there, for that matter, how would they reach out to you and get in contact with you?
Well, I have several ways. They can email me.
Okay, what's that email?
And so they could email me, they could email my personal email or my business email, but
Okay,
I would say ebonylcole@gmail.com would be one good way.
okay,
I also have a website. It's
okay.
ebonycoleenterprises.com. And then there's a mechanism through there where they could reach me.
There it is.
Yep.
Okay.
And then
Well,
they can
again,
learn more about what I do and, some of the things that they could possibly participate in. Because, I help people write their stories, it's particularly if it's trauma involved, because,
yeah.
when you write about it, to write it is to relive it. And
Mm,
sometimes that's difficult. And so you
okay.
need somebody to walk you through that. And that's what I do. So
Well, thank you again, Dr. Cole. We certainly appreciate you sharing. We appreciate that. So we know how to get in contact with Dr. Ebony Cole. Sometimes I want to call her Dr. E. Cole or
I'm
Coley
here for
Cole.
that. No, I'm here for the eco.
And so thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Will.
Yeah.